So today's topic is all about food here in the All About You tribe. My name is Becca YogaBex Cummings. So honored and privileged to be here with you today. So today you can expect to learn how what you eat, how you become what you eat. We are what we eat, and how to increase your metabolism, what to eat and when. If you've ever researched an approach to eating or tried to figure out like what's the best foods to eat, what's the best times of day, yada, 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 it can be very overwhelming. I know I got overwhelmed when I was researching all of that for myself because there's a lot of different approaches out there. So we're going to dive into that a little bit today. And the truth about cravings. Okay, so that's what you can expect to come out the other side of this training with. And I'll also be giving you an offer during this session that some of you will want to hop on. So, all about food. We're talking about food today. And food is your regular food and your water. Okay, so food and water. Let's start with water, shall we? Water, you want to be drinking, take your weight, however much you weigh, and divide that in half. And that is the minimum number of ounces of water per day that you need to be taking in. Now, if you drink caffeine like me, or sweat a lot like me. I live in Texas, so a lot of sweating here, especially this time of year. Or you exercise vigorously, you're excreting sweat, you're losing water. Certain foods can be dehydrating, smoking is dehydrating, things like that. So if any of those are a factor for you, you would want to increase that baseline accordingly. Okay. And you can use like a container, fill that in the morning, and then fill your glass or water bottle from that so you have a sense. If you're just trying to keep track of number of glasses of water, it's easy to lose track. So I like to use a big gallon container. I fill that in the morning, and then I go from there. Okay, so divide your weight in half. That's the baseline number of ounces you want to be taking in of water. And again, if you drink caffeine, smoke, anything that dehydrates, things like that, then increase your water intake accordingly. So how you become what you eat is through your intake of food, first and foremost, what you eat, what you're putting in your mouth, your digestion, how you break down the food, and then your absorption of those macro and micro nutrients. Okay. And digestion begins before the food even enters your mouth. Okay. Have you ever smelled smelled a food and started salivating, or even just thought of a food and started salivating? Like, just close your eyes for a moment. If you're not driving or something, close your eyes for a moment and imagine taking a bite into a really juicy lemon. Okay, did any of you have any saliva start? Okay, so saliva is extremely important in the digestive process. And one thing you could try if you're willing, it's really fascinating to do this, is to take a slice of apple or say, a handful of almonds or something, or whatever you want to eat, and try chewing it 40 times and see what's left in your mouth. Okay. I was gonna, this is kind of gross, but I was gonna take a slice of apple, chew it 40 times and spit it out and have it in a little bowl to show you. But it really breaks down the food. The saliva does, as well as the mastication, the chewing. So try chewing your food 40 times. And another thing is slow down how quickly you're eating. So slow down the pace. One of the things we learned about at the nutrition school I went to, Institute for Integrative Nutrition, is offering the suggestion of putting down your utensil between bites. Or if you're using your hands, like say you're eating a hamburger or something, or a sandwich or whatever, or an apple even, setting it down between bites, chewing 40 times. That in it of itself is such a profound practice. And there's a book I have over on the shelf over there, which I forgot to grab, but it's called The Yoga of Eating. Okay, so mindful eating, being mindful of your food choices, but actually also mindful of how you're eating, when you're eating, and all that stuff too, right? Think of mindless eating for a moment. I've definitely done my share of mindless eating in this life. And, you're not present with your food. And yoga is the practice of presence, right? It's the practice of being in the now, in the here and the now where the breath lives. That's why the breath is so key in yoga. It's because the breath, only breathing in the now. And so, notice your breathing as well while you're eating. Chew your food, try putting your food item or utensil down, and be very present with another practice you can try too is noticing what your tongue does as you're chewing that 40 times, which sounds like a lot. Um, Notice all the movements of the tongue and how the tongue moves the food around in the mouth. Okay, so being very present with the sensations of eating. And an Ayurvedic approach, Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga. And it's basically the concept is that we have the five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Okay. And the concept of the foundation of Ayurveda is changing your diet with the seasons, eating seasonally, right? Which makes sense because different foods used to be available at different times of the year. Now we have all foods available all the time, it seems like. But it's based on your dosha or your type or your constitution. And there's the earth or the kapha dosha. There's the pitta or the fire dosha. And there's the air or the, I'm blanking out on the kapha, pitta, vata, the air dosha, okay? And each one of us is a combination of those three things. And they put water in with earth and ether or space in with air. And each one of us is a combination of those three doshas, and that changes through your life. Think of a baby versus a senior citizen, okay? Babies are mostly water, like 95% water. And a senior citizen is a senior adult is, you get dried out through life, become more and more airy. We eat less and less, and people in the last stages of life eat very little. And how in hospitals, how they know when somebody's getting near the end is they stop eating altogether, right? So they stop taking in food. They might just have, intravenous liquids coming in at that point. So pay attention to what you eat, how you're consuming food, chew your food, and be mindful, and consider changing what you eat with the seasons. Now, in regard to what to eat, right, there are hundreds of different approaches out there, hundreds of different approaches. That's Coda. And it can be very overwhelming to try to figure out which one to follow. And there is no one approach that works for everyone. Everyone's different, okay? And what I love about the superfood nutrition program that I follow and share with people is that it's very adaptable and customizable. In fact, I was just working with a client yesterday who the vegetarian approach worked at first for him with the superfood nutrition program, but then he plateaued. And so we're actually bringing in meat for him because he is a type O blood type. And one of the dietary approaches out there is eat right for your blood type, with type O being the thinking here is that, or the hypothesis is that that type O blood type is a more ancient blood type, like paleo diet, Atkins diet, where you're heavy on the meats. Like these are your meat eaters. They've got to have meat. My husband's type O blood type. Take him off meat, he goes out of balance. Okay. And then, we have the other blood types, with A being more recent in human evolution is the thinking. And I'm type A blood type, and those type A's are more prone to not be don't really need meat, maybe eat it, but don't need it. Might crave it every once in a while for that protein source. Now, I love cheese, so that's, something that I eat for protein. But so this person I was working with, the approach of going vegan did not work for him. I mean, it worked for a while with the initial stages of his detox. He lost like 25 pounds in the first month, but then he plateaued over the past 2 months. So now we're changing things. We're tinkering with his intake of food and water and these micro and macronutrients, right? So macronutrients are your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. And the micronutrients, and that's where you get your calories from: proteins, carbs, and fats. And your micronutrients are your vitamins and minerals. Okay, so like vitamins A, B, C, D, E, and K. And your minerals like calcium, zinc, iron, magnesium, things like that. And one of the ways that you can increase your metabolism is by looking at what the balance of those macronutrients. Okay, are you in excess with carbohydrate intake? They recommend different. There's a different range depending on if you're vegetarian versus a meat eater, a carnivore, or an omnivore. And so with the proteins, if you're not vegetarian, it's recommended that 40% of your calories come from our protein source. And for carbs, it's 35%. And for fats, it's 25%. Now, if you're vegetarian, you're going to be eating more plants. And so you're going to have more carbohydrate intake, right? Just by the nature of things. Okay. So that would be, you'd shift those levels slightly, basically. Okay. And you can get a lot of your nutrition, of your nutrients, your macro and micro nutrients, through food, but also through supplementation. Vitamin D from being out in the sun, right? Getting that vitamin D up through solar energy. But what's happened in the United States is our soils have become depleted from excessive use of pesticides and not allowing the fields to lay fallow long enough. So they do, farmers often do have fallow fields. If you're driving through the Midwest, you'll see a crop and then an empty field, a crop and an empty field. And so they're letting that field rest for a season, and then they'll plant that one and rest the one that was planted, right? So they do let it lay fallow, but a lot of the minerals, the nutrients in the soil have been depleted through pesticides, through not resting the soil long enough, etc. And so what's happened with our food system and a lot of the foods that are available is it's what's called the SAD diet, or the Standard American Diet, SAD. And so this absence of the micronutrients in the Standard American Diet, processed foods, prepackaged foods, but even just, foods grown, like non-organic or, GMO foods, the soil's so depleted that they just don't contain those nutrients, those micronutrients, okay? So there's a deficiency in the foods that are available. And then what happens with you is then there's a deficiency in our physical vessel, right? So looking at shifting what you eat, improving the quality of what you eat can be very important, right? Moving towards organic, moving towards foods that are grown close to the earth, eating foods that haven't been transported miles and miles and miles from where they were grown is also helpful, unless we've got access to these superfoods like this, which are live dehydrated close to the farms. Okay, so they cut the wheatgrass and then they live dehydrate it. And so instead of cutting the wheatgrass and then transporting it in a refrigerated truck to the supermarket or the processing facility, and then from the processing facility where it's packaged or labeled or whatever to the store, and it sits in the store, and then you get in your car or it's delivered to you these days, and then it gets into your fridge. There's a lot of steps there for it to continue losing its nutritive value. And that's why the superfood nutrition that I have access to and I love sharing with people through gift cards is so amazing, because this is the highest quality food on the planet. And I'm not exaggerating. And people feel it. We've got organic farmers in our company. One gal in particular, Raven, she wouldn't mind if I shared this because she talks about it all the time. She was like, when Skylar first approached her with these superfoods, she's like, I'm an organic farmer. I don't want your stupid powders, and, go away. And then she got really sick and really sick, really, really sick. And she finally said, all right, you're looking and feeling great. Let me try some. And within a week, she was feeling better. And we see that over and over again. Getting these superfoods into your body quickly shifts people. Let me just look at my notes here. So we want to go from SAD, Standard American Diet, SAD, to RAD, right? And so I invite you to consider doing end of summer reset with me with the superfoods. So just put that in the back burner right now. Let's continue our conversation. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. And it is fully customizable. We would have a session, holistic health session. You and me get on Zoom, and we go over not just your current nutritional intake, right? But also what else is going on in your life, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. Because the metaphysical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic can be a factor too. Or even just your attitude about eating something can be huge. If you have a lot of judgment you're placing on yourself for having a treat, that's, that's going to affect you. That's going to affect how you process the food, how it's absorbed, and everything. Okay, so if you're going to have a treat, enjoy it. Enjoy it. All right. And again, there's no one approach that's right for everyone. That's why it's so important to hop on a Zoom with me, and we can look at what's going on with you. Because if you're having cravings, here's the truth about cravings, guys. If you're having cravings, cravings are just information. A craving is a need needs to be filled. Your body, mind, spirit has a need, okay? So it can be a physical need or physiological need, okay? You can be hungry and need to eat. You can be mineral deficient. You could have a candida overgrowth that's perpetuating your sugar cravings, giving you the sugar blues, right? And sugar, by the way, is the most addictive substance known to humankind. I'm trying to start saying humankind instead of mankind. And they had a study where they offered rats morphine or Oreo cookies, and guess what they went for? And not only did they go for the Oreo cookies, but they didn't go for the chocolate wafer part. They went for the white filling part, okay? They skipped the morphine and went for that white filling. So sugar is the most addictive substance known to humankind. And when it was first refined in France, it was kept under lock and key. So when you're dealing with a sugar addiction, here's my sugar addiction. Love hot tamales and used to love Dr. Pepper. Not so much anymore, but occasionally I have a Dr. Pepper, occasionally I have some hot tamales. And my attitude about it is it's a treat. I'm going to enjoy it. But if you're dealing with sugar addiction, it can be a self-perpetuating cycle. And cigarettes actually have a fair amount of sugar in them, because the tobacco, sugar is used to desiccate or dry out the tobacco. So when you're smoking cigarettes, you can be taking in a lot of sugar as well. So coming off of smoking, you can have sugar cravings. Coming off of alcohol, if you've been drinking a lot of alcohol, a very common thing is for alcoholics in recovery to go for those donuts, to go for those, cakes, cookies, ice cream, things like that. Because the candida, which is normally present in your gut, the yeast in your gut has overgrown. And so as they start to die off, they start screaming out chemically, feed me. And one thing that can be really helpful for dealing with sugar cravings is an amino acid called L-glutamine. L-glutamine. And what you do if you're dealing with sugar cravings is when the craving hits, you take a capsule and you open it up and you pour the powder right under your tongue. Wow. And you let it dissolve. I'm not going to let it dissolve right now because I need to talk. Let it dissolve sublingually, okay? Glutamine also helps build muscle. As an amino acid, it's a precursor to protein, which helps build muscle. And sit with that, let it dissolve. And if the craving is still there, you just do another capsule. Oh my gosh. And I learned about this from an amino acid specialist, therapist, who was running an addiction recovery clinic. And she was having the typical lack of success rate as all rehab centers do, which is only 1 out of 10 people are successful in their recovery. 9 out of 10 people relapse until she brought in amino acid therapy, which includes things like L-glutamine, tryptophan, um, things that boost your serotonin, your dopamine, depending on what's going on. There's a whole questionnaire you fill out to figure out what you need, what supplementation you need, which is as good or better than getting a blood test. And once she brought in that amino acid theory into her holistic clinic, it was a holistic approach, she nearly flipped those percentages and went to 80% of people being successful in holding their recovery intention and 20% of people failing. Okay. And so we need a holistic approach because we're holistic beings, right? We're spiritual beings, in a physical body. We have the mental and the emotional and the energetic going on too. And so what we're going to be diving into over the course of the next month is a deep dive into each of the 4 primary foods. Now, the primary foods are things that that might throw off your food balance, and they're around this USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture food plate, which some brilliant person came up with. Instead of the food pyramid, we now have the food plate. You can see how big the vegetables portions. We have veggies, fruits, protein, whole grains, water, fats. And around the outside are the primary foods, your relationships, your physical activity and rest, your career or life purpose, and your spiritual connection, your spirituality. And so we look at your whole being, right? We look at the balance of your nutritional intake. Have you been using substances? Have you been having too much sugar coming in? We look at the quality of your relationships, your physical activity and rest, your career or life purpose, satisfaction, and connection with the spiritual. So we look at all of those elements, right? Because if something's off in the primary foods, it can perpetuate, some sort of bad habit or some sort of soothing with food. So it's really important to look at all of those elements. And in regard to metabolism, let's talk about that because that's really important. Our metabolism naturally decreases as we age. It slows down naturally. We dry out as we age, and our metabolism slows down as we age, right? And metabolism is a combination of 2 processes. It's a combination of breaking things down, so making those molecules smaller, and building things up. Okay, so the breaking things down is known as catabolism or catabolic processes. And then the building up or growth, building muscle, things like that, that is anabolism or anabolic processes. And you need a balance of both. And that is also what sets apart the transformations I do with people with the Superfood Nutrition Program, okay? Is because instead of most cleanses, most resets are going to take you into a catabolic state. You're going to lose muscle. Whereas with the Superfood Nutrition Program, you gain muscle. You get a lot of muscle tone, your skin tightens, clears up, your digestion improves because we have a particular product that pulls pesticides out of your gut and helps improve the health of all those little microvilli that line the small intestine. Because a lot of times they've been damaged, as well as your microbiota has been impacted by these pesticides in the foods, or too much sugar or alcohol or whatever substances, right? And so You need a balance of both those processes, catabolism or breaking down of things, and anabolism or building up and growing your muscles. Okay. And it's just really powerful to go through this 30-day program. It's really easy to follow. It's fully customizable. As I was mentioning before, we can customize it depending on what works for you, what your current approach is. And there, as I mentioned, there's hundreds of different approaches out there. There's even an ice cream diet. Believe it or not, there's an ice cream diet. And I learned about all these different approaches to eating at Integrative Nutrition, Institute for Integrative Nutrition, the nutrition school I went through that founded by Joshua Rosenthal. And that's where I learned about primary foods as well as foods and nutrition. But there's just so many different diets and approaches. There's the breatharians that, just breathe. They don't eat actual physical food. They breathe and they must drink water too, right? There's fruitarians. They just eat fruit and drink water. You have different types of vegetarianism. You've got your ovo-lacto vegetarians that eat eggs and animal products, not animal flesh, but cheese, dairy, things like that for protein. There's vegans that are just plant-based, that don't eat any animal, like a blood-free, they call it a blood-free diet. There's the Mediterranean diet, right? There's Atkins, there's South Beach, there's keto, there's paleo. How do you figure out what to eat? One thing you can do is keep a food diary and notice how you feel after you eat certain foods. Do you have an energy crash after you eat certain foods? Do certain foods cause bloating, distension, gas? Get a little graphic here. Constipation, diarrhea. How are your poops? Notice the quality of your poops. My digestive system was really off for a number of years. So I was spending all this money on super healthy organic food, but I wasn't absorbing the nutrients properly. And I was having a lot of digestive problems, a lot of bloating and gas. I never left the house without gas X and Tums. I always had that around the house, in my purse, in the vehicle. That should have been an indicator there was an issue, right? But it just became my normal. And so we get used to how things are, treating a symptom. But once I healed my gut, then I was finally able to absorb these good nutrients. And then once I found the superfoods, it got even better from there. So one thing I want to mention about some of these, some of the foods out there is that they can be addictive, right? So processed foods can be addictive. So you want to be careful with those. Cheese can even be addictive. Did you know that cheese, the casomorphine in cheese or caseins in cheese, plug in to the opioid receptors in the brain? And so there's certain foods that are going to give you some carbohydrates, some carbs like breads, also have, once you break down the bread, it's digested, some elements in the bread plug into those opioid receptors in the brain too, which gives you that feeling, right? So keep a food diary. Notice how you feel, not just what you're eating or number of calories. I mean, you can track that too if you want, but notice how you feel energetically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of that. Because we're taking in the essence of the being, whether that's plant or animal, right? We're taking in its essence. Was the animal treated well? Was it pumped full of hormones? Was it, if it's chicken, like was it, smashed together in a building, a warehouse with a bunch of other chickens? Was it stress when it was killed? All of these things are factors, right? And so if you do go vegetarian, it's really important that you get enough protein. And that is something that when I was vegetarian, I did it for activist reasons. That is something I did not do well, is I wasn't good. I was very carb heavy in my vegetarianism, and didn't combine foods properly to get those complete proteins. I don't know if we knew about quinoa back then in the 80s in the United States. Anyway, I'm sure quinoa is an ancient grain from South America, but it's a complete protein. So taking in those proteins is really, really important. And drinking enough water. Sometimes we're just thirsty. Sometimes we're just dehydrated and we're not actually hungry. Other times we're soothing with food. And if we can be okay with that and be mindful of it, it does a lot. It does a lot. Just having that attitude of letting go of the idea that I'm cheating or this is bad for me. I shouldn't be doing this. Because when you're placing those judgments on what you're putting into yourself, that is affecting you at the cellular level, right? Let me just get my glasses on. I'm going to wrap this up here, make sure I covered everything. Yeah, the main thing is that there's no single approach to eating, but you can figure it out. Another thing you can use is muscle testing. So you can muscle test foods. And the way of muscle testing is that I love that you can self-test is to hold the food item stand up in a nice, good posture, hold the food item at your solar plexus area. So you can hold the superfoods there and you're standing up, and you start with something that you know is good for you and you digest easily and you like to eat, say like an apple or something like that. And if you fall towards it, it means typically, falling towards it means yes. Falling backwards means no. Yes, forward, no, backwards, typically. Now, some people are going to be wired opposite. So that's why you want to test it out and determine. It's like using a pendulum, if you've ever used a pendulum. If you do pendulum work, you could use a pendulum, yes or no, or however direction your pendulum moves for yes and no. Candy or sweets, things like that. You might get a no, but you might decide, I would really like a treat today, or whatever it is, where it's a celebration. You go to a party or something, and you're allowing yourself that. So be accepting. If you are going to have a treat, be very accepting, mindful, and love it, and really enjoy it. Enjoy it, right? Instead of judging it and being harsh on yourself. So I'd love to invite you into a free holistic health discovery session so we can, if you've been wondering what to eat, when to eat, and the other thing I'll say about when to eat is think of an office building, like a 20-story office building. We've got different companies in there. What happens at night typically? At night, the janitor comes in, or janitors. The janitor comes in at night. And that's what's going on in our being as well, in our vessel, is at night, you want to pause the intake at some point in the evening. I try to go for like 8, 9 p.m. Some nights, like if we've had a show or something, if we've had a performance, if our band has performed, we are, getting home at 1, 2 in the morning, and we have had a very physical evening, and Wes and I are typically starving by then. So like we ate at 3 or 4 and we're just like starving. So we will eat late at night sometimes, and we enjoy it. But having a cutoff time in the evening, and then breaking your fast in the morning, breakfast, breaking your fast, right? Breaking your fast in the morning with a good breakfast There is something called intermittent fasting. That's an approach that some people take. Some people don't eat till noon, and then they eat like noon to 8 p.m. That's their window of time where they're taking in food. They're drinking water, otherwise, they're drinking other beverages, but food in that window. If you drink coffee in the morning, it's a diuretic. It's going to reduce your inclination to want to eat. And so you may not be hungry till later in the morning. And that's fine too. If you smoke, that is also tends to be a diuretic. Okay, so things that dehydrate you, but also turn off your hormones that spur you to eat, to want to eat. It's going to dampen those down. So keep that in mind as well. I mean, you don't want to like force yourself to eat a big meal, but eat a little something anyway and break your fast mindfully. Eat regularly so you keep your blood sugar stable, and then let those janitors come in the evening and do the cleanup. So that is what I have for you today. I'm going to see if I can pop into the chat here and put that link for you to schedule your free holistic health discovery session with me. There's a little questionnaire you fill out, and a lot of you will gain insights just from that questionnaire. And then during the session, I'll help you connect some dots, and you'll learn some amazing things about yourself during the session. It's a totally free session, 40-minute session. And I'll also have some suggestions for you. I've worked with thousands of people at this point, and I've seen a lot of different conditions, things like that. And so there is a solution for what you're dealing with. Know that, and I can help you connect those dots if you want to have a session with me. So that is what I have for you today, guys. Thank you so much for being here, and happy eating. We will continue the conversation next week, diving into detail about those primary foods. One of those 4 primary foods will be our topic next week. I'm not sure which one yet. Talk to you later. Namaste, y'all.